The year was 1815, and Miss Katherine Dawson had precisely 3 shillings and 6pence to her name when she arrived at Thornfield Hall. The imposing stone mansion loomed before her, its countless windows like judging eyes upon her threadbare travelling cloak. She clutched her small valise containing her few possessions, 2 serviceable gowns, a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets, and a miniature portrait of her late parents, all that remained of her once comfortable life. "You are the new governess, I presume?" The housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, a woman of considerable stature and even more considerable disapproval, looked Catherine up and down with a pursed mouth. "Yes," Catherine replied, straightening her posture. Her voice betrayed none of the apprehension churning within her stomach. "Miss Dawson, arrived to instruct Lady Caroline. His Grace mentioned you were orphaned recently." It was not a question but an assessment, as if being parentless were a quality to be measured alongside her education and manners. "My parents perished at sea 6 months ago, returning from the West Indies." Catherine kept her chin lifted. "But I assure you my circumstances have no bearing on my abilities as a governess." The housekeeper harumphed. "We shall see. His Grace, the Duke of Stanton, is most particular about his ward's education." Catherine had never met a duke before, and she rather hoped to postpone the experience as long as possible. Fortune, however, had other designs. As Mrs. Winters led her through the grand entrance hall, a door swung open, and a tall figure emerged from what appeared to be a library. Catherine had only a moment to register broad shoulders, a stern countenance, and ice the colour of a stormy sea before she remembered to curtsy. "Your Grace," Mrs. Winters said, "the new governess has arrived." The Duke of Stanton regarded Catherine with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Not quite disdain, not quite curiosity. "Miss Dawson," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I trust your journey was uneventful." "Quite uneventful, Your Grace," she replied, willing her voice not to tremble. "Though the countryside is most beautiful." "Indeed." His gaze lingered on her face a moment longer than propriety strictly allowed. "Lady Caroline has been most eager for your arrival. She has exhausted the patience of 2 governesses already, and she is but 10 years old." "I look forward to making her acquaintance," Catherine said, though her heart sank at the implication of a difficult charge. "Do you, indeed?" The Duke's mouth quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "That would make you unique among the staff. My ward has a certain vivacity that some find challenging. Children often display high spirits when they possess keen intellects, Your Grace." "Is that your professional assessment, Miss Dawson?" "It is my observation from experience, sir." His eyebrow arched. "We shall see if your optimism survives the week." With a slight bow, he turned to leave, then paused. "I understand you play the pianoforte." "I do, Your Grace. Caroline's musical education has been woefully neglected. See to it that she practices daily. Good day, Miss Dawson." With that, he was gone, leaving Catherine with the curious sensation that she had passed some sort of test she hadn't known she was taking. Lady Caroline Stanton proved to be exactly as advertised, a whirlwind of energy, curiosity, and stubborn resistance to anything resembling discipline. Her blonde curls bounced as wildly as her temperament, and by the end of Catherine's first day, she had already been subjected to a frog in her work basket and ink strategically placed on her chair. "You didn't scream," Caroline observed with disappointment when Catherine calmly removed the amphibian from among her sewing threads. Miss Pembroke screamed so loudly that Uncle Kent came running with a fireplace poker. "I find that creatures are generally more frightened of us than we are of them," Catherine replied mildly. "Now, shall we continue with your French conjugations, or would you prefer to return our little friend to the garden pond?" Caroline narrowed her eyes, clearly reassessing her new adversary. "The pond, I think. A wise choice. And perhaps afterward, we might begin our music lesson." "I detest the pianoforte," Caroline declared as they walked through the gardens. "My fingers are not meant for such tedious work." "What are they meant for, then?" Catherine asked. The girl considered this seriously. "Adventure. Sword fighting, perhaps. Or discovering new species of beetles." Katherine smiled. I see no reason why the same fingers cannot both play Mozart and collect beetles. The best adventurers, after all, are well-rounded in their accomplishments. Caroline looked skeptical but not entirely unmoved by this logic. Their return to the house coincided with the arrival of a visitor, a gentleman astride a magnificent black stallion. From the window of the music room, Katherine observed the Duke emerge from the house to greet him, the two men clasping hands with evident familiarity. That's Lord Russell, Caroline informed her, nose pressed to the glass. His Uncle Kent's closest friend from their Oxford days. He brings me sweets and tells the most thrilling tales of his travels. How lovely, Katherine murmured, watching the easy camaraderie between the two men, such a contrast to the Duke's formal demeanor with her. She turned to the pianoforte. Shall we begin? Caroline groaned but took her place on the bench. Katherine stood beside her, demonstrating the proper hand position. Like this, she said, placing her own fingers on the keys and playing a simple melody. The music flowed from her fingertips, a piece her mother had taught her long ago. Katherine closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself to remember the joy of playing in her family's modest drawing room, her father turning pages of music, her mother nodding encouragement. When she opened them, she found Caroline watching her with newfound interest, and the Duke standing in the doorway, his expression inscrutable. I did not mean to interrupt, he said, stepping into the room. Katherine curtsied. Not at all, Your Grace. We were just beginning Lady Caroline's lesson. I didn't know you could play like that, Caroline blurted out. It sounded pretty. Thank you, Katherine said, hiding her surprise at the compliment. The Duke approached the instrument. What was that piece? I don't believe I'm familiar with it. It's nothing well known, Your Grace. A simple folk melody my mother arranged. She taught you to play? Yes, sir. Music was considered an essential part of a lady's education in our household, humble though it was. His eyes narrowed slightly. Your speech and manner suggest more than a humble upbringing, Miss Dawson. Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. My father was a scholar, sir. A professor of natural philosophy at Cambridge before ill health forced him to seek warmer climates. We lived modestly but valued education above material comforts. I see. His gaze was penetrating. And now you find yourself teaching my ward. Fortune's will turns in unexpected ways. Indeed it does, Your Grace. Play something else, Caroline demanded, breaking the tension. Something lively that I might learn. Katherine smiled at the girl's sudden enthusiasm. As you wish, my lady. She seated herself properly and began a sprightly country dance, her fingers dancing over the keys. To her surprise, the Duke remained, leaning against the pianoforte, his eyes never leaving her hands. When she finished, Caroline clapped. I want to learn that one. In time, you shall, Katherine promised. But first, we must master the scales. The girl's face fell. Must we? I'm afraid so. Even the most accomplished musicians began with scales. Miss Dawson is correct, the Duke interjected. Excellence requires foundation, Caroline. You would do well to heed her instruction. Caroline sighed dramatically but placed her small fingers on the keys as Katherine demonstrated. Lord Russell awaits you in the library, the Duke said to his ward. He has brought you a gift from London. Caroline leapt from the bench. Is it a book of beetles? He promised. Go and discover for yourself, he replied, his stern face softening as the girl dashed from the room. Alone with the Duke, Katherine felt suddenly conscious of the impropriety. She rose from the piano bench and moved toward the door. You play with feeling, Miss Dawson, he said, halting her retreat. It's rare to find technical skill and genuine emotion in combination. Thank you, Your Grace. Caroline's mother was a talented musician. Before she died, she extracted my promise that her daughter would receive a thorough musical education. His face grew distant. My sister was most insistent about such matters. I understand, sir. I shall do my utmost to honor your sister's wishes. His expression cleared. See that you do, Miss Dawson. Good day. Katherine curtsied as he left, wondering at the complicated man who had employed her. The Duke of Stanton was clearly devoted to his niece, yet there was a sorrow about him, a heaviness she recognized all too well as grief's persistent shadow. The weeks passed, and Katherine found herself settling into life at Thornfield Hall. Caroline, though still spirited, had begun to show genuine progress in her studies, particularly music, to everyone's surprise. The girl's initial resistance had given way to real enthusiasm once Katherine discovered her affinity for dramatic pieces that allowed for expressive playing. Miss Dawson, Caroline announced one afternoon as they walked through the rose garden, Uncle says we are to go to London for the season. Katherine's heart sank. Indeed? When do you depart? We depart in a fortnight, Caroline corrected. Uncle specifically said you are to accompany us. He says my education must not be interrupted, even for social obligations. I see, Katherine said, though in truth, she did not see at all. A governess in a ducal London residence during the season would be a precarious position indeed. That evening, she was summoned to the Duke's study after dinner. He sat behind an imposing mahogany desk, papers strewn before him. Ah, Miss Dawson. He gestured to a chair. Please, be seated. She perched on the edge of the offered seat, hands folded in her lap. Caroline informs me she has shared our plans for London, he said without preamble. I trust this arrangement is acceptable to you. Of course, Your Grace. I am employed at your discretion. His lips quirked. That is not what I asked, Miss Dawson. I inquired whether the arrangement was acceptable to you. Katherine hesitated. I am concerned that my presence might complicate matters in London society. How so? A governess occupies an awkward position in a household during the season, sir. Neither family nor servant, precisely. I am well aware of the social complexities, Miss Dawson. His voice held a note of impatience. However, Caroline has made more progress under your tutelage than with any previous governess. I am unwilling to disrupt that progress for the sake of social convention. As you wish, Your Grace. He studied her for a moment. There is something else troubling you. Katherine was startled by his perception. It's nothing of consequence. I prefer honest speech, Miss Dawson. She took a deep breath. Very well, sir. I possess no suitable attire for London. My current wardrobe is adequate for country life, but I fear it would reflect poorly on your household in town. Understanding dawned in his eyes. I see. That is easily remedied. Mrs. Winters will arrange for the sempstress to attend to you tomorrow. You shall have whatever is necessary for your position in my household. Your Grace, I couldn't possibly. It is not charity, Miss Dawson. It is a practical necessity. Consider it part of your compensation. Katherine swallowed her pride. You are most generous, sir. He waved away her gratitude. There is one other matter. I understand from Mrs. Winters that tomorrow is your birthday. Katherine blinked in surprise. She had mentioned it in passing to Caroline, never expecting the information to reach the Duke. Yes, Your Grace. How old will you be? 21, sir. He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. A significant milestone. You will join us for dinner tomorrow evening. So, Caroline has planned a small celebration. It would disappoint her greatly if you refused. Katherine was speechless. The Duke of Stanton was inviting her, a governess, to dine at his table. I thank you, Your Grace. He dismissed her with a nod, already returning his attention to his papers. Katherine left the study in a state of confusion. The Duke was an enigma, formal and distant one moment, unexpectedly considerate the next. The following evening found Katherine dressed in her best gown, a simple blue muslin that had belonged to her mother. She had pinned her dark curls more carefully than usual and allowed herself a touch of rose water at her wrists. Dinner was an intimate affair with just the Duke, Caroline, and Lord Russell, who had arrived that afternoon from his neighbouring estate. To Catherine's relief, conversation flowed easily, with Lord Russell regaling them with tales of his recent visit to Vienna. "And how do you find life at Thornfield Hall, Miss Dawson?" Lord Russell asked, his friendly manner putting her at ease. "Has Caroline run you ragged yet?" "On the contrary, my lord," Catherine replied with a smile. "Lady Caroline is a most rewarding pupil." "High praise indeed, Kent," Lord Russell said to the Duke. "The last governess, as I recall, departed in tears after only a month." "Miss Dawson possesses more fortitude than most," the Duke observed, his eyes meeting Catherine's across the table. After the meal, they retired to the drawing-room, where Caroline immediately demanded music. "Please, Miss Dawson," she implored. "Play the piece you were practicing yesterday. The one that made me cry." Catherine hesitated, glancing at the Duke. Perhaps his Grace would prefer something more cheerful for the evening's entertainment. "I should like to hear whatever moved Caroline to tears," he said. "It would be a novelty indeed." With reluctance, Catherine took her place at the pianoforte. The piece was one of her own composition, written in the dark days after her parents' death. She had never intended anyone to hear it, playing it only for herself when she believed the music room empty. She closed her eyes and began to play. The melody was simple at first, wistful and questioning, before building to a passionate crescendo that spoke of grief and loss, then finally resolving into something like acceptance, not happiness, precisely, but peace. When the final notes faded, she opened her eyes to find the room utterly silent. Caroline was wiping tears from her cheeks. Lord Russell looked thoughtful, and the Duke was watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. "That was extraordinary," Lord Russell said, breaking the silence. "Mozart? Beethoven?" Catherine flushed. "Neither, my lord. It is my own composition." "Yours?" the Duke asked, his voice strange. "You wrote that piece?" "Yes, Your Grace. After my parents died." She rose from the bench, uncomfortable with their scrutiny. "Forgive me. It was perhaps too melancholy for the occasion." "No," the Duke said sharply. "It was perfect." He cleared his throat. "Caroline, it is time you retired. Wish Miss Dawson a happy birthday and say good night." The girl approached Catherine with uncharacteristic solemnity and presented her with a small package. "I made this for you. Uncle helped." Inside was a delicate bookmark embroidered with roses and Catherine's initials. "It's beautiful," Catherine said sincerely. "Thank you, Lady Caroline." After the child departed, an awkward silence fell. Lord Russell, with tact that Catherine appreciated, excused himself to the library, leaving her alone with the Duke. "I have something for you as well," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. He handed her a small velvet pouch. Inside, Catherine found a silver locket on a fine chain. "Your Grace, I cannot accept such a gift," she protested. "You can and you will," he replied firmly. "Open it." With trembling fingers, she did as instructed. Inside was a tiny portrait, not of the Duke, as she had half feared, but of Caroline. "She sits for few portraits willingly," he explained. "This was done last spring. I thought you might like to have it." "It's lovely," Catherine said, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you." He stepped closer, taking the locket from her hands. "Allow me." She turned, lifting her hair as he fastened the chain around her neck. His fingers brushed against her skin, and Catherine felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the evening chill. "There," he said, his voice low. "It suits you." Catherine turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close they stood. "Your Grace, The door opened, and Mrs. Winters entered, stopping short at the tableau before her. "Forgive the interruption, Your Grace," she said, her expression revealing nothing. "A messenger has arrived from London. He says it's most urgent." The Duke stepped back, his face resuming its customary impassivity. "Thank you, Miss Dawson, for a most pleasant evening. Good night." He departed, leaving Katherine clutching the locket and wondering what might have happened if Mrs. Winters had delayed her entrance by even a few moments. London in the season was everything Katherine had feared, a whirlwind of social obligations that left her largely isolated in the Duke's Mayfair residence. Caroline's days were filled with dancing lessons, fittings for new gowns, and carefully supervised outings to the park. Katherine's role diminished to morning lessons and piano practice, with the rest of her time spent in solitude while Caroline attended children's parties and other events deemed appropriate for a young lady of her station. The Duke himself was rarely seen, occupied with Parliament and his clubs. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite but distant, as if their moment of connection on her birthday had never occurred. "Miss Dawson, you look positively mournful," Lord Russell commented one afternoon, finding her alone in the music room. He had become a frequent visitor to the Duke's London home, his easy manner a welcome respite from the formality that pervaded the household. "Not at all, my lord," she replied, forcing a smile. "Merely contemplative." He settled into a chair near the pianoforte. "I find London rather tedious myself. Too many people, too much gossip, too little genuine conversation." "I wouldn't know, sir. My experience of London society is quite limited." "A situation Kent should remedy," he said, frowning. "You've been in town nearly a month, and I don't believe you've left the house except to walk in the park with Caroline. It would hardly be appropriate for a governess to attend society functions, my lord." "Perhaps not, but there are concerts and lectures that would be perfectly suitable." He leaned forward. "In fact, there's a performance of Handel at St. Martin-in-the-Fields tomorrow evening. I happen to have an extra ticket. Kent is otherwise engaged, and I find music much more enjoyable with appreciative company." Katherine hesitated. "I'm not certain His Grace would approve." "Nonsense. I'll speak to him myself." Lord Russell rose. "Consider it settled, Miss Dawson." True to his word, Lord Russell must have obtained the Duke's permission, for the following evening, Katherine found herself seated beside him in the church, entranced by the music washing over her. The outing was a balm to her spirit, and she was genuinely grateful for Lord Russell's thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she said sincerely as they departed. "It was magnificent." "The pleasure was mine," he replied, helping her into the waiting carriage. "Your face when you listen to music, Miss Dawson, is a delight to behold. You hear things others miss." She blushed at the compliment. "Music has always been my greatest comfort. As well as your greatest talent, I suspect." He studied her with a kindness that put her at ease. "Kent mentioned you were orphaned recently. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you, my lord. May I ask how you came to be Caroline's governess? It seems an unlikely position for someone of your evident refinement." Katherine sighed. "When my parents died, I discovered they had left little beyond debts. My father's health had been poor for years, requiring expensive treatments. The solicitor was kind enough to help me sell our cottage and settle what was owed, but there was nothing left afterward." She twisted her hands in her lap. "I had to find employment, and quickly. Governess positions are among the few respectable options for educated women without means." "And how did you come to Thornfield specifically?" "The solicitor's wife is acquainted with the Dowager Duchess, His Grace's mother. When she learned of my circumstances and qualifications, she recommended me for the position." Lord Russell nodded thoughtfully. "Fortune can be cruel in her turns, but occasionally she guides us where we need to be, though we may not recognize it at the time. A philosophical perspective, my lord. I've had cause to develop one." His smile held a hint of sadness. "My own path has not been without unexpected diversions." They arrived at the Duke's residence, and Lord Russell escorted her to the door. "Thank you for your company this evening, Miss Dawson." "It was my pleasure, my lord." As they entered, they found the Duke in the entrance hall, apparently just returned himself. His expression darkened as he took in their arrival. "Ah, Kent," Lord Russell said cheerfully. "We've had a splendid evening. The performance was exceptional. Was it indeed? The Duke's voice was cold. How fortunate for you both. Katherine curtsied. Good evening, Your Grace. I hope you had a pleasant evening as well. Hardly that, he replied curtly. Lady Caroline has been asking for you. She had a nightmare and refused to be comforted by her maid. I'll go to her at once, Katherine said, distressed at the thought of Caroline in distress. No need. She is asleep now. His gaze was accusatory. After an hour of tears, Katherine felt as though she'd been slapped. I'm so sorry, Your Grace. Had I known, had you been where you ought to have been, you would have known, he interrupted. Good night, Miss Dawson. He turned and stalked toward his study, leaving Katherine mortified and confused. Lord Russell sighed. Pay him no mind. Kent has always had a temper. Something else must have soured his mood this evening. Nevertheless, I should have been here for Caroline, Katherine said, blinking back tears of shame. Please excuse me, my lord. She hurried up the stairs to check on her charge, finding the girl indeed sleeping peacefully. Brushing a curl from Caroline's forehead, Katherine whispered an apology before retiring to her own chamber. Sleep eluded her that night, her mind replaying the Duke's harsh words and cold gaze. What had happened to the man who had fastened a locket around her neck with gentle fingers? Who had listened to her music with such understanding? The morning brought no answers but did bring news that the Duke had departed early for his country estate on urgent business, taking Caroline with him. Katherine was to follow with the household staff in 2 days' time. Did His Grace leave any specific instructions for me? She asked Mrs. Winters anxiously. The housekeeper's expression was sympathetic. Only that you were to return to Thornfield Hall as planned, miss. Katherine's heart sank. Had she jeopardized her position by accepting Lord Russell's invitation? The thought of losing not only her livelihood but also Caroline, to whom she had grown genuinely attached, was devastating. Lord Russell called that afternoon, his expression grave when he learned of the Duke's abrupt departure. This is my fault, he said. I should have anticipated Kent's reaction. I don't understand, Katherine admitted. Why should His Grace object to my attending a concert with you? He gave permission. Lord Russell hesitated. It's complicated, Miss Dawson. Kent and I have been friends since boyhood, but we have not always agreed on certain matters. Particularly where his family is concerned. I don't follow, my lord. No, I don't suppose you would. He sighed. It's not my place to explain. But I will speak to Kent when I return to the country. This misunderstanding should not affect your position. Katherine's return to Thornfield Hall 2 days later was a subdued affair. Caroline greeted her with enthusiastic hugs, apparently unaware of any tension, but the Duke was nowhere to be seen. Uncle has gone to inspect the tenant farms, Caroline informed her. He said he might not return until dinner. Katherine threw herself into their lessons, grateful for the routine. When evening came, however, she pleaded a headache and took a tray in her room rather than face the Duke across the dining table. The following morning, a footman delivered a note requesting her presence in the study immediately after breakfast. Katherine's hands trembled as she broke the seal. The Duke stood by the window when she entered, his back to the door. He turned at her quiet knock, his face unreadable. Miss Dawson, he said, gesturing to a chair. Please, be seated. She remained standing. If you intend to dismiss me, Your Grace, I would prefer to hear it on my feet. His eyebrows rose. Dismiss you? Is that what you believe this meeting is about? Is it not? After your displeasure the other evening, my displeasure, he interrupted, was not with you, Miss Dawson. I don't understand. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture from a man who usually maintained such rigid control. No, I don't suppose you do. He indicated the chair again. Please, sit. This conversation may take some time. Katherine perched on the edge of the seat, her posture rigid with tension. I owe you an apology, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. My behavior in London was inexcusable. You had done nothing wrong. Then why? My objection was not to the concert but to your escort. His jaw tightened. Lord Russell is not always what he appears to be. Katherine frowned. He has been nothing but kind and respectful to me. I'm sure he has been. The Duke's voice held a bitterness that surprised her. Kevin Russell excels at making favorable impressions, particularly on vulnerable young women. I hardly think my sister was one such woman, he continued, cutting her off. Caroline's mother. She was young, impressionable, and utterly charmed by him. They were to be married. Catherine's eyes widened. I had no idea. Few do. The engagement was brief and ended badly. His expression darkened. A week before the wedding, she discovered him in a compromising position with one of her friends. The shock and humiliation were devastating. She fled London, travelling north in a terrible storm. The carriage overturned. He paused, his voice growing rough. She survived long enough to give birth to Caroline but died shortly thereafter. How awful, Katherine whispered, horrified. I'm so sorry. Russell has spent the years since attempting to atone, becoming Caroline's godfather, maintaining a presence in her life. I tolerate him for her sake and because my sister would have wanted it. The Duke's eyes met hers. But I do not trust him, especially not with someone under my protection. Katherine absorbed this revelation in silence. Lord Russell had given no indication of such a past, but then, why would he? And yet, Your Grace, while I appreciate your concern, I am neither young nor particularly impressionable. I am 21 and have faced enough hardship to recognize false charm when I encounter it. Have you indeed? His mouth curved in a humorless smile. Experience suggests otherwise, Miss Dawson. She bristled at his condescension. With respect, Your Grace, you know very little about my experiences or my judgment. I know that you are alone in the world, with limited means and few protections. You are precisely the sort of woman Russell would. He stopped abruptly. Forgive me. That was unkind. Yes, it was. Katherine rose, anger overcoming her usual deference. I may be a governess, sir, but I am not without discernment or dignity. If you wish to dismiss me for accepting Lord Russell's invitation, that is your right as my employer. But please do not insult me by suggesting I am so desperate for attention that I would throw myself at any gentleman who shows me basic courtesy. The Duke stared at her, clearly taken aback by her vehemence. For a long moment, neither spoke. I have no intention of dismissing you, he finally said, his voice quieter. Caroline would never forgive me, for one thing. And for another? He hesitated. You are the finest governess she has ever had. Your influence on her has been nothing short of remarkable. The compliment, unexpected as it was, diffused some of Catherine's anger. Thank you, Your Grace. However, he continued, I must insist that you exercise greater caution regarding Lord Russell. For both our sakes. As you wish, sir. She moved toward the door, then paused. May I ask a question? You may. Why did you give me permission to attend the concert if you disapproved so strongly? A shadow crossed his face. I didn't. Russell told me he had invited you after the fact, when it was too late for me to intervene without causing a scene. I see. Katherine felt a pang of disappointment in Lord Russell's apparent manipulation. Thank you for your honesty, Your Grace. Miss Dawson, he called as she reached the door. Your birthday gift, the locket. Do you wear it still? She touched the silver chain at her neck, hidden beneath her high collar. Yes, Your Grace. Always. Something flickered in his eyes, relief, perhaps, or something warmer. I'm glad. Good day, Miss Dawson. ****** Summer brought scorching heat and a house party at Thornfield Hall. The Duke's mother, the Dowager Duchess, arrived with an entourage of fashionable friends, followed by various cousins, acquaintances, and neighbors of consequence. Katherine found herself increasingly relegated to the schoolroom with Caroline, their peaceful routine disrupted by the constant flow of guests. The Dowager Duchess was a formidable woman with shrewd eyes and a surprisingly kind smile. She summoned Katherine to her chambers on the second day of her visit. "So you are the miracle worker who has tamed my granddaughter," she said, appraising Katherine over her teacup. "Kent speaks most highly of your methods." "His Grace is too generous," Katherine murmured, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. "Kent is never generous with praise unless it is deserved," the Dowager replied. "He says Caroline's pianoforte playing has improved remarkably under your tutelage. Lady Caroline has natural talent, Your Grace. She merely needed encouragement. And you provide that encouragement through your own playing, I understand." The older woman set down her cup. "Kent mentioned a composition of yours that was particularly moving. I should like to hear it sometime." Katherine blushed. "It's a simple piece, hardly worth your Grace's attention." "I shall be the judge of that." The Dowager's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps you might favor us this evening after dinner? Kent has been prevailed upon to open the ballroom for dancing, but some music beforehand would be most welcome." The request was clearly a command, and Katherine found herself unable to refuse. That evening, wearing her best gown, one of 3 new ones the Duke had insisted on providing for her London visit, she took her place at the grand pianoforte in the drawing-room. The assembled company, some 20 guests in all, fell silent as the Duke introduced her. "Miss Dawson has kindly agreed to play for us before the dancing begins. The piece is her own composition." Katherine felt a flutter of panic at finding herself the center of attention. She glanced up to find the Duke watching her, his expression encouraging. Drawing a deep breath, she began to play. The music flowed from her fingers, more confident than when she had played it on her birthday. She had refined it in the months since, adding subtle complexities, deepening the emotional journey it conveyed. As the final notes faded, she looked up to find the room utterly silent, several ladies dabbing at their eyes with handkerchiefs. Then the applause began, led by the Dowager Duchess herself. "Magnificent," she declared. "Absolutely magnificent." Lord Russell, who had arrived that afternoon, approached the pianoforte. "Miss Dawson, you have outdone yourself. That was even more moving than when I heard it in London." Katherine saw the Duke stiffen at this reminder of their outing. "Thank you, my lord," she said, rising from the bench. "But I believe it's time for the dancing to begin." She moved to slip away to the schoolroom, but the Duke intercepted her. "You're not leaving, Miss Dawson?" "I thought it best, Your Grace. I have lessons to prepare for tomorrow." "Nonsense," the Dowager interjected, joining them. "You must stay for at least one dance. Kent, you will partner Miss Dawson for the first set." Katherine froze, mortified. "Your Grace, I couldn't possibly, Mother. Miss Dawson might prefer—" "What either of you prefer is immaterial," the Dowager said firmly. "The musicians are ready, and I have decreed it so." Thus Katherine found herself led onto the floor by the Duke himself, acutely aware of the curious glances and whispered comments from the other guests. "I apologize for my mother," he murmured as they took their places in the set. "She can be rather forceful." "It's quite all right, Your Grace," Katherine replied, though her heart was pounding. "I understand the awkwardness of the situation." "Do you?" His eyes held hers as the music began. "I'm not certain you do." They moved through the figures of the dance, their hands touching and parting as the steps required. Katherine was grateful for the structure of the country dance that allowed little opportunity for conversation. The Duke, however, seemed determined to speak. "You play differently when you believe yourself unobserved," he said as they circled each other. "I have heard you practicing when you thought the music room empty." Katherine missed a step, recovering quickly. "I was not aware you listened, Your Grace." "Often," he admitted. "Your music speaks what words cannot." Before she could respond, the dance separated them again. When next they came together, his expression had changed, become more guarded. "Russell watches you," he said, nodding subtly toward the edge of the ballroom, where Lord Russell indeed stood observing them. He has asked about your background, your circumstances.
Has he?
Katherine felt a chill despite the warmth of the room.
Be cautious, Miss Dawson.
He is, the Duke broke off as they were again separated by the dance. When the set ended, Katherine curtsied deeply.
Thank you, Your Grace.
He bowed. The pleasure was mine, Miss Dawson. Before she could escape, Lord Russell approached.
May I claim the next dance, Miss Dawson?
She glanced at the Duke, whose face had hardened.
I.e. Miss Dawson was just returning to the schoolroom, the Duke interjected.
She has duties to attend to. Lord Russell raised an eyebrow.
Surely those duties can wait for one more dance.
I'm afraid not, Katherine said, finding her voice. But thank you for the invitation, my lord. She curtsied to both gentlemen and made her escape, her mind whirling with confusion. The Duke's warning about Lord Russell seemed sincere, yet there was something else in his manner, something that felt almost like possession. Later that night, unable to sleep, Katherine slipped down to the music room. The house was quiet, the guests long since retired. She sat at the pianoforte, not playing but simply resting her fingers on the cool keys, finding comfort in their familiar feel. I thought I might find you here. She started at the Duke's voice, rising quickly from the bench. Your Grace.
I apologize for the intrusion.
I couldn't sleep and thought, no apology necessary, he interrupted, stepping into the room. This house is as much your home as anyone's. The statement, so casually made, struck Katherine deeply. Home. She had not had a true home since her parents' death. That's very kind of you to say, sir. He moved closer, his evening attire exchanged for a simple dressing gown over what appeared to be a white shirt and dark breeches. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. Will you play? He asked softly.
Something just for me.
The request, intimate in its simplicity, made Katherine's pulse quicken. What would you like to hear, Your Grace? Kent, he said. When we are alone like this, I wish you would call me Kent. She swallowed hard. I don't think that would be appropriate, sir. No, he agreed with a faint smile. It wouldn't be. But I find I care less for propriety with each passing day. He gestured to the pianoforte. Play whatever moves you in this moment. Katherine sat and closed her eyes, letting her fingers find the keys. The melody that emerged was tentative at first, questioning, then grew stronger, a piece she had been composing in her mind for weeks but had never committed to paper. It spoke of confusion and longing, of paths not taken and possibilities just out of reach. When she finished, she opened her eyes to find the Duke, Kent, standing directly beside her, his expression intense. What do you call that piece? He asked, his voice low. It doesn't have a name, she admitted. It's not finished yet. Like so many things, he murmured, more to himself than to her. He reached out, hesitantly, and touched a loose curl that had escaped her simple nighttime braid. Katherine. The use of her given name sent a shiver through her. Your Grace, we shouldn't, no, he agreed, dropping his hand. We shouldn't. He stepped back, his face regaining its customary control. Forgive me. The hour is late, and I have forgotten myself. There is nothing to forgive, she whispered. Isn't there? His smile was sad. Good night, Miss Dawson. He left her sitting at the pianoforte, her fingers still trembling from the music, and from his touch. The next morning brought chaos to Thornfield Hall. Lord Russell had departed abruptly before dawn, leaving only a brief note for the Duke. The house party guests buzzed with speculation, their whispers falling silent whenever Katherine entered a room. Caroline, sensing the tension, was more difficult than usual during her lessons, finally throwing down her pen in frustration. Why is everyone acting so strangely today? Even Uncle Kent snapped at me at breakfast. I'm sure it's nothing to concern yourself with, Katherine assured her, though her own curiosity was piqued. Now, shall we continue with our history lesson? That afternoon, the Dowager Duchess sent for Katherine again. The older woman looked troubled, pacing her sitting room with uncharacteristic agitation. "Miss Dawson, I find myself in an awkward position," she began without preamble. "A matter has been brought to my attention that concerns you directly." Catherine's stomach knotted with apprehension. Lord Russell made certain insinuations before his departure. "About your character and intentions regarding my son." Katherine felt the blood drain from her face. "I don't understand." "He suggested that you have deliberately cultivated Kent's interest through your music and your influence over Caroline. That your orphan state and apparent refinement are calculated to appeal to his protective instincts." The dowager's expression was grave. "He implied that you seek a position far above your station." "That is absurd," Katherine gasped, genuinely shocked. "I have never, would never, I believe you," the dowager interrupted, surprising her. "Russell's claims ring false to anyone who has observed you with Caroline. Your devotion to the child is genuine, as is your musical talent." She sat down, gesturing for Katherine to join her. "However, others may be less discerning. Gossip travels quickly, even from the country to London." "What are you saying, Your Grace?" The older woman sighed. "I'm saying that your position here has become precarious through no fault of your own. Kent is protective of those he cares for. And he cares for you, Miss Dawson. More than is wise, perhaps." Catherine's cheeks burned. "Your Grace, I assure you, I have never encouraged. Encouragement was unnecessary," the dowager said dryly. "My son has always formed his own opinions, regardless of anyone's encouragement or discouragement." She studied Katherine thoughtfully. "He is much like his father in that regard. The late Duke pursued me with similar single-mindedness, despite the fact that my family had lost its fortune and I was considered a poor match." Katherine blinked at this unexpected confidence. "I didn't know." "Few do. It's not a story Kent advertises, though he knows it well enough." The dowager smiled slightly. "History has a way of repeating itself, Miss Dawson. But circumstances are different now. Kent's position, his responsibility to Caroline, the expectations of society." "I understand perfectly, Your Grace," Katherine said, rising. "I shall tender my resignation immediately." "Sit down," the dowager commanded. "I haven't finished." Katherine obeyed, her heart pounding. "Kent has gone to confront Russell," the older woman continued. "He was most displeased by the insinuations. I fear what may occur between them." "Surely they wouldn't," Katherine couldn't bring herself to complete the thought. "Duel? In this day and age?" The dowager shook her head. "No. But there are other ways men damage one another. Russell knows secrets about Kent's past, about Caroline's mother, that could cause pain if aired publicly. What would you have me do, Your Grace?" The dowager regarded her steadily. "That depends entirely on your feelings for my son, Miss Dawson." Katherine felt trapped. To deny any attachment would be dishonest, to admit the depth of her feelings would confirm Lord Russell's accusations. "My feelings are irrelevant," she finally said. "I am Caroline's governess. Nothing more." "Are you certain?" The dowager's gaze was penetrating. "Because if there is any possibility that you might wish to be something more, certain preparations must be made. Your background investigated more thoroughly, your connections, limited though they may be, evaluated. The transition from Governess to Duchess would be fraught with challenges even without Russell's interference." "Duchess?" Katherine nearly choked on the word. "Your Grace, surely you don't think, I think my son has not looked at any woman the way he looks at you since Caroline's mother died." The dowager rose, signaling the end of the interview. "Consider carefully what you want, Miss Dawson. And what you are willing to endure to obtain it." The Duke returned late that evening, his face grim as he strode into the house. Katherine, who had been reading to Caroline in the library, quickly excused herself to take the sleepy child to bed. As she tucked Caroline in, the girl asked drowsily, "Is Uncle Kent angry with me?" "Of course not," Katherine assured her. "Why would you think that?" He looked so cross when he came in. And he's been strange ever since the party. Caroline yawned. Mrs. Winters says it's because of Lord Russell leaving suddenly. Did they quarrel? I couldn't say, Katherine replied carefully. But I'm certain it has nothing to do with you. Will you play for me tomorrow? Caroline asked, her eyes drifting closed. The happy piece, the one that sounds like butterflies. Of course I will. Katherine smoothed the girl's curls. Sleep well, sweetheart. She slipped from the room, only to find the Duke waiting in the corridor. His cravat was loosened, his hair dishevelled, and there was a darkening bruise on his cheekbone. Your Grace, she gasped. You're hurt. It's nothing, he dismissed, though he winced when he spoke. Is Caroline asleep? Nearly so. She's concerned about you. His expression softened. I'll speak with her in the morning. Reassure her. May I ask what happened with Lord Russell? Katherine ventured. The Duke's face hardened again. He will not trouble us further. That is all you need know. Is that all I need know? She challenged, surprising herself with her boldness. When his trouble, as you put it, directly concerns me. He studied her for a long moment. You've spoken with my mother? Yes. Then you understand the delicacy of the situation. I understand that Lord Russell has made accusations about my character and intentions. She lifted her chin. What I don't understand is why he would do so, or why you would confront him physically over the matter. The Duke glanced around the corridor. This is hardly the place for such a discussion. Then where is the place, Your Grace? Your study, where you can dismiss me as easily as you summoned me. The music room, where you asked me to call you by your given name and then retreated behind your title. Her voice trembled with emotion. I am tired of half-truths and meaningful glances that lead nowhere. If you have something to say to me, say it plainly. He stared at her, clearly taken aback by her outburst. Then, without warning, he took her arm and led her to a small sitting room adjacent to Caroline's chambers, closing the door behind them. Russell believes himself in love with you, he said without preamble. He confessed as much when I confronted him. He claimed his intentions were honorable, that he wished to marry you. Katherine was stunned. That's absurd. He barely knows me. That was my response as well. The Duke's jaw tightened. He then suggested that if he could develop such feelings after a brief acquaintance, imagine how much stronger my own must be after months of observing you with Caroline, listening to your music, watching you transform my household with your presence. And this led to blows. No. He touched his bruised cheek ruefully. This came later, when he suggested that I was repeating the pattern of my father, elevating a woman of obscure birth beyond her proper station out of infatuation rather than sense. Katherine flinched at the crude assessment. I see. Do you? He stepped closer. Because I don't believe you do, Katherine. I don't believe you see at all. What don't I see, Your Grace? Kent, he corrected softly. When we are alone like this, I am Kent to you. She swallowed hard. What don't I see? Kent. That Russell's accusations, while despicable in intent, were not entirely without foundation in fact. He took her hands in his touch gentle despite the intensity of his gaze. I have watched you. I have listened to your music. I have seen how Caroline blooms under your care. And yes, I have developed feelings that go far beyond what is appropriate between employer and governess. Katherine's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. Your Grace, Kent, I don't know what to say. Say nothing yet, he urged. Listen first. Russell's interference has forced my hand sooner than I intended. I had planned to court you properly, to give you time to know me as a man rather than as your employer. To allow society to grow accustomed to your presence in my family circle before making my intentions clear. Your intentions, she whispered. To make you my wife, Katherine. His voice was low but firm. To make you Caroline's mother in truth as well as in spirit. To hear your music fill this house for decades to come. Tears sprang to her eyes, unexpected and unstoppable. This is impossible. Why? He demanded. Because of your birth? My mother married beneath her station and found happiness. Because you were once my employee? That arrangement can end tomorrow. Because of Caroline, Katherine said, pulling her hands from his. Because of your position. A duke cannot marry a penniless governess without causing a scandal that would follow your family for generations. I care nothing for scandal. But you should care for Caroline's future prospects. For how society would treat your duchess if they believed she had schemed her way into your bed and your title. The crude words felt strange on her tongue, but she forced herself to continue. Lord Russell's accusations are only the beginning of what would be said. So you would refuse me out of fear of gossip? His voice hardened with disbelief. The woman who just moments ago demanded plain speaking now hides behind social convention. Not convention. Reality. Katherine moved toward the door. I care for you too deeply to allow you to sacrifice your reputation and Caroline's future happiness for a momentary infatuation. He caught her arm as she reached for the handle. Is that what you believe this is? A momentary infatuation. What else could it be? She asked, her voice breaking. You know so little of me. I know everything that matters, he insisted. I know your courage in facing adversity. I know your patience with a difficult child. I know the depths of your soul because I have heard it in your music. His voice softened. And I know the feel of your pulse beneath my fingers when I fastened that locket around your neck on your birthday. Katherine closed her eyes, overwhelmed by his nearness, by the truth of his words. Kent, please. Please what? He murmured, his lips close to her ear. Please leave you alone? Please forget what I've seen and heard and felt? Or please kiss you, as I've wanted to do since that night in the music room. She turned to face him, her resolve crumbling. The latter, she whispered. God help me, the latter. His mouth found hers with gentle urgency, his hands cradling her face as if she were something precious and fragile. Katherine melted into him, all her doubts momentarily silenced by the rightness of his embrace. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Tell me now that this is a momentary infatuation. I can't, she admitted. But I still fear, enough fear. He kissed her again, briefly. We will face whatever comes together. But not tonight. He stepped back, visibly collecting himself. Tonight, you will retire to your chamber and consider my proposal. Not as your employer, but as a man who loves you and wishes to spend his life listening to your music. And if my answer remains no. His expression was determined. Then I shall endeavor to change your mind. I can be most persistent, Miss Dawson, when I want something. So I've observed, she said with a tremulous smile. Rest well, Katherine. He opened the door for her. We have much to discuss tomorrow. Katherine barely slept that night, her mind churning with the Duke's, with Kent's, declaration and proposal. By dawn, she had reached no clear conclusion, torn between her heart's desire and her practical concerns about the consequences of accepting him. She rose early and went to the music room, hoping to find clarity through playing. The house was quiet, the guests still abed after a late night of cards and conversation. She sat at the pianoforte and began to play softly, improvising a melody that reflected her tumultuous emotions. You're up early. Katherine's fingers stilled on the keys as the Dowager Duchess entered the room, already impeccably dressed despite the hour. Your Grace, she acknowledged with a slight bow of her head. I hope my playing didn't disturb you. On the contrary. The older woman took a seat nearby. It's a pleasant way to begin the day. Though I suspect your early rising has more to do with my son than with any desire to practice. Katherine blushed. Your Grace, Kent spoke to me last night, the Dowager interrupted. He informed me of his intentions toward you and his determination to proceed regardless of my opinion on the matter. Her lips curved in a small smile. He is very much his father's son. And what is your opinion, Katherine asked hesitantly. That my son has chosen a woman of intelligence, talent, and genuine kindness. That Caroline could have no better mother. The dowager's expression grew serious. But also that the path ahead will not be easy. Society can be cruel, Miss Dawson, particularly to those who challenge its established order. That is precisely my concern, Katherine admitted. I fear the consequences for Kent and Caroline should he marry so far beneath his station. A legitimate worry, the dowager agreed. But perhaps not as insurmountable as you believe. She studied Katherine thoughtfully. Tell me, what do you know of your mother's family? Katherine frowned at the unexpected question. Very little. She was estranged from them before I was born. My father said they disapproved of her marrying a scholar with no fortune or title. What was her maiden name? Ellison. Katherine Ellison. The dowager's eyebrows rose. Indeed? From Hampshire. Yes, I believe so. Why do you ask? Because the Ellisons of Hampshire, while not titled, are one of the oldest and most respected families in the county. Their bloodline traces back to the Norman conquest. The dowager tapped her fingers against the arm of her chair. If you're indeed of that family, your background is hardly as obscure as you believe. Katherine was stunned. My mother never spoke of her family's standing. She said only that they were proud and unbending. Qualities that often accompany old names and older money, the dowager observed. This bears investigation. I shall write to Sir William Ellison immediately. If he is your grandfather, as I suspect, the situation changes considerably. Even if he is, Katherine said, they disowned my mother. They wanted nothing to do with her or with me. Family quarrels can be mended, especially when dukedoms are involved, the dowager replied with practicality. Sir William has no male heirs. His estate is entailed to a distant cousin he detests. A granddaughter, particularly one about to marry a duke, might suddenly seem quite appealing. Katherine's mind reeled at the implications. This seems so calculated. Welcome to the aristocracy, my dear, the dowager said dryly. Everything is calculated. But that doesn't mean the emotions involved are any less genuine. She rose. I shall make inquiries immediately. In the meantime, I suggest you avoid giving my son a definitive answer until we know more about your connections. As the dowager left, Katherine remained at the pianoforte, her fingers resting silently on the keys as she contemplated this new possibility. Could it be true? Did she come from a family of consequence after all? And if so, did it change anything about her feelings for Kent or his for her? She was still pondering these questions when Caroline burst into the music room, her face alight with excitement. Miss Dawson. Uncle Kent says we're to have a picnic by the lake today, just the three of us. Isn't that splendid? Katherine smiled at the girl's enthusiasm. Indeed it is, Lady Caroline. But first, we must attend to your lessons. Caroline pouted. Uncle said you'd say that. He said to tell you that education can sometimes take place outside the schoolroom. Did he indeed? Katherine couldn't help but laugh. Well, I suppose we could combine our nature studies with the picnic. Go and change into your walking dress, and we'll meet His Grace in half an hour. The picnic was a perfect summer idyll, warm sunshine, gentle breezes, and a basket overflowing with delicacies from the Thornfield kitchens. Caroline chattered happily about the butterflies and wildflowers they observed, diligently recording her observations in the nature journal Katherine had started with her. Kent watched them together, his expression soft with affection. When Caroline dashed off to collect specimens by the lake's edge, he moved to sit beside Katherine on the blanket. Have you considered my proposal? He asked without preamble. I've thought of little else, she admitted. But there have been complications. What complications? She hesitated. Your mother believes she may have identified my maternal family. A connection that, if proven, might make our match less socially unacceptable. His brow furrowed. And this troubles you? It feels disingenuous. As if I need an aristocratic pedigree to be worthy of your consideration. You misunderstand, he said, taking her hand. Such connections would not make you worthy of me. They would simply make it easier for others to accept what I already know, that you are extraordinary, regardless of your birth. And if no such connections exist? If I am exactly what I appear to be, a scholar's daughter with no fortune or family, then we face more opposition, he said simply. But my choice remains the same. He squeezed her hand. Katherine, I am not offering marriage because of who your family might be, but because of who you are. The woman who plays music that moves me to tears. Who has transformed a difficult, grieving child into a joyful one. Who challenges me and stands her ground even when intimidated. His words touched her deeply. Kent. Uncle. Miss Dawson. Look what I've found. Caroline called, running toward them with something cupped in her hands. Katherine reluctantly pulled her hand from Kent's as the girl approached. It's a baby frog, Caroline announced, opening her palms to reveal a tiny amphibian. May I keep him as a pet? I'm afraid he would be much happier here by the lake with his family, Katherine said gently. But perhaps we could visit him occasionally? Caroline considered this compromise. I suppose that would be acceptable. What shall we name him? How do you know it's a him? Kent asked with amusement. I don't, Caroline admitted. But he looks like a Frederick to me. Frederick the Frog, Katherine smiled. A fine name. As Caroline returned Frederick to the lakeside, Kent leaned closer to Katherine. She needs a mother, he said softly. And I need a wife. But more than either of those things, we both need you, Katherine Dawson. Say you'll marry me. Looking into his eyes, Katherine found she could no longer deny what her heart had known for months. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you, Kent. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. His smile was radiant. Together, he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss just as Caroline returned to the blanket. Are you going to be my new mother? She asked bluntly, causing both adults to break apart in surprise. That is, we, Katherine stammered, looking to Kent for assistance. Would you like that, Caroline? He asked his niece seriously. The girl considered the question with the same intensity she applied to her studies. Yes, she finally declared. Miss Dawson is kind and clever and plays beautiful music. And she doesn't scream when she finds frogs in her work basket. Kent laughed. High praise indeed. He turned to Katherine. It seems you have the approval of the most important lady in my life. I'm honored, Katherine said sincerely, opening her arms to Caroline, who happily snuggled between them on the blanket. When will you be married? The girl asked. May I be a bridesmaid? Will I still have lessons? Soon, yes, and of course, Kent answered, his eyes never leaving Katherine's face. Some things will change, but the most important things will remain the same. Like music, Caroline said with certainty. We'll always have music. Always, Katherine agreed, her heart full to bursting with love for this small, unexpected family that had become her own. The investigation into Katherine's family connections proceeded swiftly, thanks to the Dowager Duchess's extensive network of correspondence. Within a week, confirmation arrived. Katherine was indeed the granddaughter of Sir William Ellison, whose only daughter had eloped with a Cambridge scholar against his wishes 23 years earlier. He wishes to meet you, the Dowager informed Katherine, waving a letter bearing an impressive seal. Immediately, if possible. After all these years of silence. Katherine asked incredulously. Why now? As I predicted, the prospect of a ducal connection has softened his stance considerably, the Dowager replied with a knowing smile. That, and the fact that his health is failing. There is nothing like mortality to make one reconsider past rigidity. Kent, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke. You are under no obligation to meet him, Katherine. Our plans proceed regardless of Sir William's interest or approval. I know, she said softly. But he is my only living family. My mother's father. I would like to know him, if only to better understand her. And so it was arranged. Sir William Ellison arrived at Thornfield Hall 3 days later, a dignified gentleman whose stern countenance bore a startling resemblance to Catherine's own mother in her rare moments of displeasure. Their meeting was private, held in the same drawing-room where Catherine had first played her composition for the Duke's guests. She waited nervously, standing by the pianoforte as if it might provide some protection or comfort. When Sir William entered, leaning heavily on a cane, she curtsied deeply. "Grandfather," she said, the word feeling strange on her tongue. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. Then, to her astonishment, his eyes filled with tears. "You look exactly like her," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "My Catherine. My only child." "I'm told I have her eyes," Catherine said softly. "And her love of music." "Yes." He moved closer, still studying her face. "She was the most talented pianist in Hampshire." Before he broke off, visibly collecting himself. "Before she left to marry my father," Catherine supplied. "A man she loved deeply." "A man without prospects or property," Sir William corrected, a flash of the old bitterness returning. "A man who took her from her home, her position, her inheritance." "A man who gave her happiness," Catherine countered gently. "And a daughter who loved her." The old man's expression softened slightly. "Were they happy, then?" "Truly?" "Very much so. Even when circumstances were difficult, when my father's health began to fail, they found joy in each other and in their shared interests." Catherine moved to the pianoforte. "May I play something for you?" "A piece my mother taught me." Without waiting for his response, she sat and began to play, a delicate, intricate sonata that her mother had played on special occasions, her most treasured piece. Sir William gasped in recognition. That was her mother's composition. "My wife's. I haven't heard it played since." "Since my mother left," Catherine finished for him. "She taught it to me when I was 12. Said it was a family legacy, more precious than jewels or land." When she finished playing, she looked up to find the old man weeping silently, all pretense of sternness gone. "Forgive me," he said brokenly. "I was proud and foolish. I lost my daughter to my own stubborn will, and now she is gone forever." "Not entirely," Catherine said, rising to approach him. "Part of her lives on in me. In my music, in my memories." "You have her spirit as well as her face," he observed, regaining some of his composure. "The Dowager Duchess tells me you've captured a duke with your playing." A hint of pride crept into his voice. "Though I understand he would have had you regardless of your connections." "He says so," Catherine acknowledged with a small smile. "Though I confess, knowing of my connection to you has made the prospect less daunting." "You are an Ellison," Sir William said firmly. "My blood runs in your veins. That counts for something in this world, ducal marriage or no." He hesitated, then reached for her hand. "I would like to know my granddaughter, if she can find it in her heart to forgive an old man's pride." "I would like that too," Catherine said, squeezing his fingers gently. When Kent joined them later, he found grandfather and granddaughter seated side by side at the pianoforte, playing a duet with the ease of long-time musical partners. "Your Grace," Sir William acknowledged, rising with some difficulty. "I understand you wish to marry my granddaughter." "I do, sir," Kent replied, his eyes meeting Catherine's with warmth. "With your blessing, if possible. Without it, if necessary." Sir William barked a laugh. "Directness. Good. I detest mealy-mouthed suitors." He glanced between them. "You love her, I presume?" "More than I can express," Kent answered without hesitation. "And you, Catherine? Do you love this duke of yours?" "With all my heart," she replied softly. Sir William nodded, satisfied. "Then you have my blessing, for whatever it's worth after all these years." His expression grew serious. "But I would make one request." "Name it," Kent said. that the wedding take place at Ellison Hall, the home that should have been Catherine's mother's inheritance. Let me give her what I denied her mother, a proper beginning to her married life. Kent looked to Katherine, the decision clearly hers to make. I would be honored, she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you, grandfather. The wedding of His Grace, Kent Stanton, the Duke of Stanton, to Miss Katherine Dawson, granddaughter of Sir William Ellison, became the social event of the season. The story of the orphaned governess who captured a duke's heart through her music captured the public's imagination, transforming what might have been a scandal into a romantic tale worthy of novels. On the morning of her wedding, Katherine sat at the pianoforte in the music room of Ellison Hall, playing the composition that had first revealed her soul to Kent. The piece had evolved over the months, growing from an expression of grief to one of hope and love. I thought I might find you here, Kent said, entering the room despite tradition's dictate that he should not see his bride before the ceremony. It's bad luck, she admonished, though she made no move to leave the instrument. I've never been superstitious, he replied, coming to sit beside her on the bench. Besides, I wanted a moment alone with you before you become a duchess and I lose you to social obligations for the rest of the day. She laughed. You won't lose me. Not ever. Promise, he asked, suddenly serious. With all my heart, she assured him, reaching up to touch his face. From the moment you fastened that locket around my neck, I think I was already yours. I simply didn't know it yet. He kissed her then, a promise of the lifetime they would share. A delicate cough from the doorway interrupted them. Caroline stood there, resplendent in her bridesmaid gown, her expression a mixture of disgust and amusement. Grandmother says it's time, she announced. And that Uncle Kent is breaking all sorts of rules by being here. When have I ever concerned myself with rules? Kent replied, winking at his niece. Never, Caroline said with certainty. But Miss Dawson, Aunt Katherine, is supposed to be the sensible one. Sensible enough to marry your uncle, Katherine pointed out, rising from the bench. So perhaps not so very sensible after all. Kent laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the music room. Go, before my mother comes searching for us both. I'll see you at the altar. I'll be the one in white, Katherine teased, allowing Caroline to pull her toward the door. And I'll be the one waiting impatiently to begin our life together, he called after her. As Katherine walked down the aisle on her grandfather's arm, her eyes found Kent immediately. The church was filled with nobility and gentry, but she saw only him, the man who had heard her music and understood her heart. Caroline stood proudly beside her uncle, beaming as Katherine approached. The girl who had once placed frogs in her governess's work-basket now held the ring that would bind them as family. When Kent took her hand, Katherine felt the rightness of it all, the journey that had brought her from orphaned governess to beloved wife, from solitude to family. Are you ready, Miss Dawson? He whispered as the clergyman prepared to begin the service. Ready, Your Grace, she replied with a smile that contained all her love. To play the most beautiful duet of all.